The twilight of day lingered, and the sharp lines of light and shadow divided the sky into light and dark. On the wide, empty road, only a white car sped away.
Speed up!
Looking out of the window at the Loveland TV tower soaring in the distance, Eli's bad feeling was getting worse. Once again, he asked the special task force driver to speed up. It had been more than 10 minutes after Gavin's brief report, and at Gavin's speed, he must have been almost at the TV tower. Under the circumstances, any evol is an unstable bomb that can explode at any time. Moreover, it was the television tower, the site they had searched for so long before, which was the source of the Loveland City evol uprising. The car sped up again, drawing near to the soaring buildings. Without waiting for the car to stop, Eli hauled the door open and jumped down, striding toward the gate of the TV tower. Suddenly, hearing the sound of wind, Eli subconsciously looked up, which nearly stopped his heartbeat. He immediately changed his direction, but the people falling from the sky were much faster than he was, so fast that he could hear the crash of heavy objects.
Damn it!
Eli fought back the pain of being torn from his body and managed to use his ability again. The thin air gathered hard and caught the two falling from the sky at the last moment. The pain darkened his eyes as he took several steps back to steady himself. In a tight embrace, the two gently landed in front of Eli. In a coma, Gavin frowned, blood oozing from the unbandaged wounds and soaking the white uniform of the Special Task Force. The girl in his arms was protected from the heavy landing. She had dry tears on her face, and yet a peaceful expression. Eli shook his head from the trance, looking at the insensible duo.
It's worth it to see this guy looking like a drowned rat.
Then he turned to the medics and asked for help. The scouting squad came out from the TV tower and ran to Eli to report.
Captain, we didn't find anyone suspicious in the tower. The transmitter at the top had been removed.
Unexpectedly, none of the task objectives were completed. Eli couldn't help pinching his forehead only to come up with a random reason.
Seems the Black Swan has fulfilled their purpose.
He just didn't know what they were up to next. Leaning on his nearest team member's shoulder, he had a hard time breathing with his left hand pressing against his pained chest.
Damn it! It hurts.
Consciousness fading, he heard a cry of panic.
Captain! Medic! Medic!
After the events at the TV tower, things seemed to be over. Most of the people in the Special Task Force were seriously injured in the evol riot. In addition to those who got wounded due to catching the evolvers, many suffered serious damage to their evol when it got out of control. After 2 days of observation in the hospital, Eli was finally told his evol had not been greatly affected and would only need a period of recuperation. Although the impact was not major, these days, Eli often woke up only to find that something had vanished, such as a cup, a quilt, or something else. Just like this moment. Eli opened his eyes, yawned, and turned to see that Gavin had disappeared from the bed next to him.
Oh no.
He held his forehead, wondering if it was him that unconsciously teleported Gavin elsewhere in his sleep. Then the door opened. Gavin strode in, dressed in casual clothes, looking different from the man who had been badly injured and unable to move the day before. He walked over to the bed and quickly collected his personal belongings. Puzzled, Eli shook off his irrelevant thoughts, gazing at Gavin, who appeared safe and sound, and asked,
How are you able to get up?
Gavin glanced at Eli and said,
I'm leaving the hospital today.
Wait, leaving?
Eli wondered if he had heard something wrong, and blurted out,
If memory serves, you were badly wounded, weren't you?
You think everyone's as weak as you are.
Gavin raised his eyebrow. Eli was sure he was mocking him. With great effort, he sat up, pulled his scattered hair behind him, and replied in a dissatisfied tone.
I'm weak? Your fast recovery is abnormal.
Gavin paid no attention to him. He walked to the door and was about to leave. Eli asked,
Leaving so soon? What about that girl?
with his hand on the door. Gavin answered without looking back.
She's also being discharged from the hospital today. I'll be taking her home. See you later.
Gavin dropped the last word as the door slammed behind him. Eli, with a dull ache in his body, silently wondered,
Am I really that weak?
Except for the occasional checkup, Gavin had been missing since he left the hospital. He seemed to be very nervous about the girl. No wonder. It happened to whoever experienced the event after all. The investigation into Black Swan had also ended. No unrest caused by the runaway Evol had occurred recently, and basically, no follow-up actions had been confirmed in the short term. Eli was relieved because nearly half of the Special Task Force was almost paralyzed. His treatment is now in the follow-up rehabilitation phase. He occasionally complained that he recovered so much slower than in the past. Then again, he didn't mind the thought of early retirement. After receiving his checkup, Eli walked out slowly, only to bump into someone he hadn't seen for days in the corridor.
Ah, a rare visitor.
Eli thought better of teasing him, because he found Gavin's expression to be quite stern. He stopped and asked in confusion,
What's up? What happened to the girl?
Shaking his head, Gavin paused for a moment, raised his sad eyes to him, and asked in a deep voice,
Do you remember Lytton?
Lytton?
After pinching his chin for a while, Eli recalled the man who had left many years ago. He was Gavin's captain for a short time, and they had seemed to have a good relationship. But what happened?
Why are you mentioning him out of the blue?
Eli's eyes seemed to sweep across Gavin's expression carelessly, but failed to capture anything special. Gavin dropped his eyes.
He's back.
Gavin immediately departed, leaving Eli confused. He said to himself,
What does that even mean?
From Eli's report, a few years ago, Lytton was dismissed from the Special Task Force for disobeying orders. After that, he seemed to disappear, and it was believed that he went back to his hometown to get married. Does that mean he's back in the city? Or... Eli rubbed his knuckles gently and began to feel the bite of his long-gone addiction. The long life of an old cadre had dulled his senses and taste. Eli stretched lazily, hearing his bones pop like a rusty machine. Today was his 5th visit to the commander's office. The commander finally gave him permission to return to work and put him on a backup mission in the field.
I knew they were useless without me.
Eli shook his head as he left, a tune on his lips. The corridors were quiet, as if the Special Task Force were no longer functioning due to its serious injuries. There was something lurking in the silence. He glanced at the surveillance cameras around the corner and headed in the opposite direction when stepping into the unmonitored area. People say men's intuition is not as good as women's, yet occasionally it's of some use. Eli skillfully entered the Special Task Force confidential database. Lines of dusty messages appeared before his eyes. His relaxed expression became stern.
Too bad.
He touched his chin and sighed. Then he sent a message to Gavin, but received no reply. Late at night, Eli stood smoking in the shadow by the window. There was the sound of a slight step in the silent corridor. Looking back, Gavin was there. He was holding in his hand a familiar black box, which Eli knew at a glance. He spat out a puff of white smoke and asked,
Is that Lytton's file? You already know?
Gavin nodded. Eli lowered his voice.
Do you know what you're doing?
There was no answer from Gavin. The two men quietly confronted each other. After a long silence, Gavin spoke in a hoarse voice.
What is justice to you?
Stunned, Eli didn't expect such a question. He searched Gavin's face. The shadow and darkness were so deep in Gavin's eyes, as if all the resolution and light from the past were gone. He couldn't understand what kind of change had occurred. Eli pondered for a moment, snuffed out his cigarette, and then replied,
I won't stand in your way.
He waved to Gavin, who was a little surprised, and walked to the archives, leaving a casual remark.
Leave the mop up to me, just as before.
When approaching the corner, Eli looked back and saw Gavin standing straight. Yet he could feel Gavin's soul trembling painfully and wavering between uncertainty and remorse. He knew his way through the confidential archives, clearing away the evidence Gavin had left, and repeated Gavin's words in a low voice.
What is justice?
Before setting out for his mission, Eli contacted Gavin. On the phone, Gavin seemed to have anticipated what would happen. He finally entrusted Eli with the protection of the girl in the dark. Although Eli had a bad feeling about this kind of entrustment at a critical juncture, he promised anyway. After hanging up the phone, Eli looked up at the overcast sky. The smell in the air forecast a storm coming. The backup mission did not go smoothly, despite no mistakes being made in the end. After a series of twists and turns, the matter was resolved several days prior. Having arranged the follow-up tasks, Eli went back alone to Loveland City in advance. He did not expect to find a wanted poster for Gavin upon his return to the Special Task Force.
What's going on here?
He read through the contents of the internal wanted poster and thought it was ridiculous.
Special Task Force Agent B7 disrupted the Special Action Squad's task execution and intended to mutiny.
Gavin did this? Despite the obstruction of his teammates, Eli broke into the commander's office. The man sat behind the desk, meticulous in his hair and clothes. He put down his pen and looked up at Eli, asking indifferently,
Eli, any report?
Why is Gavin a wanted man?
Eli's hands fell heavily on the desk in front of Leto, causing a loud sound. All of his usual ease was gone, and he could hardly constrain his anger.
According to my inquiry, the Special Action Squad's mission did not go through the task execution process required by the Special Task Force. So, Commander, it's your responsibility to explain. What exactly was this squad doing?
You've crossed the line.
Leto rose from the table, tidied his clothes with both hands, and raised his head.
Special Task Force B7's mutiny against the Special Task Force is a fact. That's all you need to know. Eli, you should see clearly what your justice is.
The words echoed in Eli's mind all night, from evening to dawn, popping up without reason. He thought about it many times over the next few days. Things had changed, and Eli hesitated about asking the commander about it again. The wanted poster for Gavin was withdrawn by the superior authority. Hearing the news, Eli chuckled and threw half a pack of smokes in the trash. He was relieved to know that Gavin was fine. He thought to himself, what is justice? It's no more than doing the right thing and sticking to it, just as they had done before.